we always knew that somebody was going to be this draft's Ryan Pace and fall in love with a quarterback and trade up to do it. We watched it happen in reverse here a few years ago. So we've been fascinated with, and it doesn't matter anymore really for us, but I'm wondering how you feel about the ranking of the top quarterbacks in this draft and if it's changed. Would you go through your top 5 quarterbacks? I'll include Hendon Hooker in that. So give me your top 5, PFF's top 5, if those are the same things. And I'm wondering if that's changed at all in the months of over-analysis.
It really hasn't over the past few months. I think the tape is still king. And pretty much everything you've seen, whether it's, Anthony Richardson being a freak athlete or Will Levis having a cannon for an arm, like if you didn't see those on tape, you weren't doing your job to begin with. So this obviously hasn't changed it much. How I see it is I think Bryce Young at 1 is in a tier of his own. I think he's a special quarterback prospect, like right up there, right behind guys like Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence in terms of certainty with which I feel him being good in the NFL. So I think he's 1. I have Will Levis 2. I have C.J. Stroud 3, Anthony Richardson 4. And then I actually don't even have Hendon Hooker 5. I have Tanner McKee from Stanford 5. But that's how I see the top 5. I think the first 4 guys on that list are guys that have franchise type of tools, franchise type of potential that I fully expect all of them to go within, if not the top 10, the top 20.
So just for our understanding as we're talking here, are these the official Pro Football Focus rankings or your personal take on those rankings?
Well, I control the draft board here at PFF, so those are Pro Football Focus's rankings.
All right. Yes.
Well, all right then.
Yeah, what draft board do you control, Dan Bernstein?
I don't have a draft board.
I know. That's why we have Mike Renner.
That's the point. Mike, how do you combine in the way that we think of Pro Football Focus as being objective and data-driven, how do you reconcile college stats with what is measured at the combine and other data points?
It's the hardest thing in scouting, right? It's what everyone wants to do is basically take this player out of their situation and evaluate them independently of that. And it's impossible to do, right? You truly cannot imagine what C.J. Stroud would look like in Kentucky's offense last year. It's just no one can conceptualize that, and no one can do it accurately. And that's the beauty of scouting. That's why it's so much fun. That's why we debate over this. But it's something that you have to do, right? And that's why you focus on things that they'll have to do at the next level. So for quarterbacks, like you focus on pressure and how they handle that because you get more at the NFL level. Like it's a big part of the game is how you deal and operate from tight pockets that can really alter or just basically can really show the men from the boys at that level. So you focus on certain things that they'll be asked to do at the next level and try to emphasize those and de-emphasize things that basically won't factor into their success or lack thereof once they get to the NFL.
Do you have a feel for whether Carolina knew exactly what quarterback they had in mind? Because it was reported that maybe they had a couple different quarterbacks they talked about when they made the deal with the Bears.
To me, that stuff is so – they have to have a quarterback in mind. I think with the 49ers thing, I still do not believe that they changed their mind. I have heard from people with very close knowledge of the 49ers organization that they didn't change their mind when they drafted Trey Lance. That was the move all along. And that I think they have a guy that they know they want. And now maybe it's 2 guys they know they want, and they could be swayed by an interview on what they did sitting down with them, what they did on the whiteboard. But you don't make the move just saying like, yeah, we like them all. Like you do your homework. You do a lot of homework on this before you make a move like that, in my opinion, or else you'll be out of a job in a few years.
We have some listeners surprised you have Levis over Stroud. Instead of telling us why Levis is that high, tell us about your fears about Stroud, if any, and if they relate at all to Justin Fields from the same offense.
Yeah, I think Stroud's a little robotic in how he plays the quarterback position. And you see that work when you have, the best receiver in the country in Marvin Harrison Jr. You have another guy who's probably going to be a first-rounder in Emeka Egbuka. The year prior, obviously, 3 first-rounders you had that you were throwing to. Like, it works when you can just point and shoot, and that guy's open, that guy's open, that guy. Like, when there's just so many guys that are open. But the kind of creativity when things break down, I just don't see as much. I worry about him kind of throwing down the football field when he doesn't have those elite athletes, because he was throwing some hospital balls to his guys and missing some safeties on tape that I think at the NFL level could be a lot more costly to him than it was in college, when these safeties don't have near the range that they do once you get to the league. So those are my worries with him, is that just kind of what I was referring to about when things go wrong, when it's bad, when it's not great. You saw him really, really start to struggle, whereas with like Bryce Young, when things are kind of not there, when nothing's going on, I mean, that guy can create on his own better than any prospect I've seen in recent years.
I can't decide if hospital ball is adorably evocative or crass and inhumane. It's somewhere on the continuum there. I get what you're saying, though, when the safety coming downhill realizes that the eyes aren't on him.
Yeah, and you see that with Stroud. Like he'll do some predetermining on his tape of, I look this way and then I know I'm coming back this way to throw it, and thinking that he's moved the safety with his eyes. And when he doesn't move the safety with his eyes, he still throws it there is the problem.
Well, with those gowns, I don't like that they don't usually don't let you wear underwear underneath the gowns. So oftentimes things are just like lingering down there. Talking to Mike Renner from Pro Football Focus. We were talking to somebody yesterday about the Ohio State prospects. And they said that they had heard from a couple different people that Jackson Smith-Njigba might be the only true first-round grade wide receiver in this draft. And we were both like, what about Quentin Johnston? What about Jordan Addison? So, like, how many wide receivers are legit first-round grade for you in this draft?
I had Jackson Smith-Njigba and Quentin Johnston. I think I see Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison as like fringe first-rounders, which, like, at the wide receiver position today, you still take that guy in the first round. They're still going to go in the first round. We saw, like, I thought Jahan Dotson was a fringe first rounder last year, and he went 16. It's just the nature of the world. You saw it in Chicago. If you don't have weapons, you just can't move the ball consistently through the air. It's just, that is what's winning today. If you look around the league objectively, the teams that are stockpiling weapons are the teams that are these explosive offenses. So even if a guy's a fringe first rounder, that's still a guy you want in your starting lineup, and a guy who's going to move the needle over probably who you have there.
What position in this draft has the best sort of mid-round blob of value, where you know that you didn't get that guy, but somebody else is going to be there who can help you?
I think it's cornerback. I think this cornerback group is very deep, even into day two, where, depending on my scheme, I think if you're sitting in the third round, you can get a starter. It's that deep. I think I had 13 guys in the top 100 at corner on the PFF draft board that, if you guys forgot, I control.
We didn't forget.
I'm just messing with you guys.
Yeah.
But it's a super deep class at corner with a lot of different body types too.
Wow. Well, so that's interesting because, look, we've been thinking about what the Bears are going to do at 9, and Ryan Poles had told us that he has like 7 blue players in this draft, and he was including the quarterbacks in that, which is interesting. So I don't know how many of the quarterbacks he thinks are blue players and stuff like that. But so it could be an option. Do they go Devin Witherspoon or Christian Gonzalez as a corner at 9? But maybe if they can get a corner later, they'll stick with a tackle. And we wonder, what tackles do you love? And is Paris Johnson clearly the guy over Peter Skoronski because of the arms? Where are we on tackles at 9 for the Bears?
I think for the Bears, I think I agree with that reasoning that, like, you'll find corners later. Tackles you won't find later. I don't think defensive linemen you'll find too many later. So that's where I would trend, honestly, if I was running the Bears draft here. But the tackle class specifically, I think Skoronski is the safest one. If you told me one guy is going to be good in this class, I would bet it's him. You saw that on his tape, like the hand usage, the athletic ability that it takes to play just anywhere along the offensive line. He already does well. The consistency aspect with whether it's Paris Johnson, whether it's Broderick Jones, Darnell Wright, I think is worrisome. Maybe less worrisome with Johnson because he really only 1 year left tackle, hasn't played a ton of football there, and so you make some excuses for that guy. But I think Johnson's high end is the highest in this draft class, but Skoronski is the safer one. So if you're the Bears and you're kind of in a situation where you kind of just need good offensive linemen. Like you could use anyone. I think I'd go for the security of a guy like Pierce Skoronsky at that point.
So, do you think he's a guard? I mean, I love everything about the kid. I just worry about the arm length. That's the only thing I worry about.
So Braden Smith has the shortest arms of any tackle in the NFL right now. The Colts tackle. He's good. Like, he's a quality starter, getting paid a good amount too. Same length as Pierce Skoronsky. So it can be done. I think ideally, he's probably a better guard than he is a tackle, but he's probably a pretty damn good tackle too. Like, we've seen guys like Marshall Yanda, Zach Martin, when those guys kick out the tackle, who are elite guards, when they play tackle, they're still pretty damn good tackles. So I do think if you wanted him to play tackle, you more than could have him play there.
Similar question regarding the defensive line, and it gets back to the way you answered the question about how you try to make objective decisions by picturing people in different schemes. The three technique spot is a very specific job for a very specific defense, to be that disruptive gap shooting under tackle with the guy eating up the double team to your side. When you are looking at some of these guys, do you look at someone and scout them as a three technique only if they were actually that three technique in a 3-4, or are you looking at 3 or 4-3 defensive tackles and saying body type, skill set, mentality that it should be looked at for that specific job in the NFL?
Yeah, you're looking at body type and explosiveness. So like physical ability, because to be a three tech, you want a guy that can win, that can get upfield and get in the backfield, whether it's from the run game, whether it's as a pass rusher. So it's 10 split and it's like agility drills. Like that is what you want at the tackle, at the three tech position. Size, not nearly as impactful. Arm length, you can make some concessions there. So to get a three tech, it is a pure penetration position, so that's what you're looking for.
So who are those guys? We did a deep dive on Lucas Van Ness, and we wonder whether he is a three tech. Atabare from Northwestern is obviously a guy, and I think looking through your timeline, I think you'd like Atabare to be drafted a little higher. And then Kalijah Cansey from Pitt. Obviously, there's a lot, but it's difficult for guys like us to figure out who are three technique possibilities and five technique. I don't see it a lot in draft rankings.
Yeah, so obviously Jalen Carter is like good enough that he's anywhere. He's any alignment that guy's going to win from. So Carter's your best one in this draft class. But then after him, I think Kalijah Cansey's next. I think he obviously was one of the best testing defensive tackles of all time. Tested out more athletically than Aaron Donald across the board, and so that's a good starting point. That's what the three technique position is. Even if his arm length and his size is really at the bottom end of the position for defensive line in the NFL, he can get upfield, he can attack the passer. I think Tommy Atabare is like in that mold too in terms of freak DT, but he was an edge at Northwestern, right? He really didn't play a ton of it, and I still think he's coming along in terms of like, how do we utilize that quickness? I think he still wants to attack blocks more than get around blocks on his tape, and that's something that'll have to develop once he gets to the league. But that's kind of it. The other DTs in this class, whether it's like Brian Brzee, is more of like a five tech, a guy who's going to head up over tackle, even if you could play him at three tech a little bit. Monty Smith's more of a nose tackle. That's kind of like, those are your three techs if you're looking for that role. The guys I mentioned.
That's scary. So we're only three deep at three tech, essentially?
The weak DT class. I think later in the draft, there are some like obvious names. I think the Wake Forest DT, Kobe Turner, is kind of in that mold. There's a number of guys later, but it's a weak defensive tackle class. So unfortunately for Bears fans.
Man. All right. I got one thing I got to pitch to you. I have a scouting term I need to pitch to you directly. I'm very excited about that. But first, tell us about Tank Dell. Because I liked Tank Dell, the wide receiver out of Houston, a whole lot at Senior Bowl week. And, the Bears have, now that they have DJ Moore, they'll still take a flyer somewhere in round 3, 4, 5 on a wide receiver, very likely because of the importance of the position.
And because Velus Jones sucks.
Yeah, that's a big old miss, big old fat miss. Tell us about Tank Dell and when he might go.
Well, he's a lot better than Velus Jones, I'll say. He's like, so Velus Jones was just straight line speed. And to me, straight line speed is the most overrated trait for a wide receiver by far. Like you need to have controlled speed and you need to have controlled quickness to be able to accelerate at a moment's notice and like in a different direction than where you're currently going. That's how you get open in the NFL, not just going fast in one direction. And Tank Dell is that guy. Like he is so nimble and quick on his feet that I think 20 years ago the NFL would have ignored him altogether because you could just crush those guys over the middle of the field and really like go to town on them, and he had no recourse. But now with the illegal contact and with, you know, the penalties and roughing calls the way they are, like you can't hit this guy the same way. And so if you really can't get overly physical with him, as soon as he has a little space, he's getting more space because he's just that dynamic. So I'm a fan of his. Like he's like a Darnell Mooney with a little bit more underneath route running ability. That's probably how I'd pose him at the next level. But Darnell Mooney's obviously like a little faster, a little more downfield guy, but that's the kind of mold you're looking at.
I like how you describe that change to the game. That is nothing but a positive evolution. I think if you have more space now because they're policing some of that stuff better for something that is that exciting and entertaining, good for football.
Yeah, it's why Devontae Smith is able to play at a high level. It's why a lot of like you're seeing these classes like Garrett Wilson was 178 pounds last year. Olave was like 182. You're just seeing the position get turned into, you know, a track stars, like guys who look no different than what they look like out on a track and field track.